What are some of the nuances that you have to do that are market specific to ensure that those brands are actually going to resonate with the consumer?
Hey everyone, welcome to our latest TDR Cannabis Exclusive. Last week we had a few companies on and talked about just the overall industry and getting to know them more specifically about branding, and we want to continue down that narrative here today. We're all waiting for the next catalyst moment, but important to find out what companies are doing, how they're growing, because at the end of the day, consumers either buying the product or they're not. So what makes a good brand? Let's welcome in our next guest to our podcast. He is the Vice President of Marketing and Research Development at MariMed, which trades on the CSE under the ticker symbol MRMD. Jay O'Malley, good to see you. First time you've had you on the podcast. How are things?
Great. Thank you for having me. Nice to see you both.
Good to see you. Anthony Verrill, good to see you as well.
Good to see you. Ready to dive in.
Jay, hope you're not a Patriots fan being out in Boston. Tough year for you guys.
Thanks for raising that first. Yeah, it's been a tough year, but we had a really nice Sunday.
That was a good win. Good win, to say the least.
The NBA kicks off tonight, so I'm hoping you're a Celtics fan.
Celtics are a little more our speed these days in town.
Yeah. Well, you guys were spoiled. How many Super Bowls? Six in a matter of 15?
20-something year run, 6 wins, 9 appearances. Yeah, we had our runs.
Yeah.
It's okay for a year or two for somebody else to get a chance, but then we'll be ready to take it
Your
back.
CEO, John Levine, would want to squash me after opening up a podcast with that type of question. Big Patriots fan. But anyways, listen, off the top, like I said, in the past, we've had a lot of C-suite executives on from the company to talk about company development, stock performance, legislation news. But as we wait for that next, catalyst moment within the industry, important to educate viewers on what we're doing as far as bringing more brand awareness. What are consumer trends? Because truthfully, at the end of the day, if you're not growing, it's because your products don't relate and you're not really seeing what the consumer trends as to what they want. But that's something that you guys have done really well. So before I get into specific brands, you've got a long history of working in the alcohol industry.
Right.
Data is showing that alcohol is trending down, cannabis is trending up. So with that 20 years of experience, was that one of the main reasons why I guess you left a well-established industry and then pivoted into the cannabis industry that is young, vibrant, and growing?
Yeah, Chad, I mean, that's exactly it. It just was an opportunity to get to, when I joined the craft beer industry 25 years ago, it felt a little like what cannabis does today.
Interesting.
And it was fun. And the opportunities were abound to try all different types of things. And that's cannabis today. And so as somebody who loves brands, background in entrepreneurship in terms of school and studies, it was just, I don't know of a more exciting place to be right now. It's risky, it's crazy, but there's so much opportunity and so much fun to be had that
it's fun.
Why wouldn't you want to do this?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, what were I guess some of the main key learnings? I mean, 20 years in the alcohol industry, and I mean cannabis as an emerging category in the CPG space. I mean, what are some of the key learnings that you've crossed over from the alcohol industry into cannabis when developing the portfolio of brands that we all know from MariMed, as well as, I guess, researching and developing the products?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I'll say is I'm so lucky to be at MariMed because the team before me, that has built these brands like Ryan and John and Tim and those guys, they built amazing brands, right? And they had great foresight, great creativity, great products that for us to build from. So it's like a beautiful place to come to. To me, the similarities are building a brand is like raising a kid. It's long, it's hard, there's ups and downs, but you're not going to change kids. Like you got that kid and you have to do everything you can to nurture it all along the way. And so, it's about sort of just being steady as she goes and stick with it. It takes a long time. For as brand people, we sometimes get excited about what's the new message or what else can we do? But consumers don't think about us every day, all day long, as shocking as that might sound. Consumers think about us, if we're lucky, for a second a week, maybe. And so for us, it's what I take most, Anthony, from the beer side, and what I learned from Jim Cook and the team over there is make your brand really easy to think about and really easy to find.
Right.
And if you just boil it down to that, easy to think about and easy to find, you have to have a great tasting product, et cetera. But from a
Yeah.
pure marketing standpoint, boil it down to that. And then you can kind of just keep focused on that and always make sure you go back to that.
I mean, do you see cannabis kind of being analogous to alcohol in a way that it's distributed, consumed, especially in like a social setting? Like I know that you guys have the vibations, the actual beverage packets, like the RTDs. Do
Right.
you see beverages really coming full circle in this industry long term as the main, I guess, delivery mechanism for THC?
I do, and I wish I could tell you when, because that's the
Yeah,
$1 million, $1 billion question. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do. I think, and that's why you see even the beer side of the business getting into cannabis. That north of the border, they're all trying it. Boston Beer was trying it before I left, and so I think they believe it's going that way too. It's going to take time because there's
yeah,
still that, sort of it's not the mainstream yet, the way you can say, hey, to
Yeah.
a bunch of people you just met, let's go grab a beer. Most people aren't going to say, let's go grab a joint, but that's where
yeah.
beverage can come in and make it a much easier transition into cannabis for, what we call the canna curious sort of group. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
it'll be a big
yeah.
part of the road.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. Like, I get a lot of pitch decks for like deals, so I like go through things. And a light went off the other day. I was like, "Well, I actually got a deal for a CBD bottling plant in South Florida like 8 years ago that
Okay.
I thought was a terrible idea."
Yeah.
Really?
And then, and then as this stuff starts developing, I'm like looking through. I'm like, I need to go find this guy and see if this is still like on the table or what his plans were, because it was actually genius
Yeah.
back then. Because I mean, I think if beverages do come full circle, it's going to be that centralized bottling model. It's not going to be
Yeah.
having distilleries or bottling or your own bottling infrastructure just everywhere.
That's
I do
growth
see it
right
being
there.
like that Coke model.
That's growth right there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. And you're right. It's, and that's one of the challenges of beverage ever taking off is
yeah,
it's very expensive to build a brewery, and to
hmm
make great beverages in cannabis, you essentially need a brewery. But the problem is you need one in every state.
yeah,
And you're going to build something that far exceeds the capacity you need right now,
Yeah.
which is economically a bit of a challenge in terms of getting your long-term margins right. It's a big capital investment. Someday when you can cross state lines, I think you're absolutely right. It'll be
yeah.
like the craft beer industry. There'll be regional, there might be local brands, regional brands, and then national brands. And those national brands will probably be the dominant share of the business.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that you guys have quite a robust portfolio of brands with top to bottom as far as the product mix goes as well. And I
Right.
mean, you guys are like from, or not from, but I mean, started out in Massachusetts with a heavy emphasis in the Massachusetts market. We've seen you guys expand as we've covered the story. And I'll just want to use Illinois as an example. I mean, penetrating a market and bringing those brands to a market. I know that you guys keep congruency with your brands as they expand. You don't really pivot the name like we've seen some companies do, which I'm a fan of because it's ultimately going to lead to the longevity of the company. Like, what are some of the nuances that you have to do that are market specific to ensure that those brands are actually going to resonate with the consumer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right. We try to maintain continuity as much as we possibly can. Obviously, state by state, it makes it a little difficult. And you take a brand like Betty's Eddies, which is this
Yeah.
beautiful brand that we put a whole effects line against last year, and the packaging, every package is artistically drawn. I mean, there's
Yeah.
beautiful artist work with the fruits and everything on it. And then you get to, so that's in Massachusetts. You get to another state, you got to remove the fruit. Then you get to another state and you can't use the same effect. So it makes it a challenge, but to the best we possibly can, we maintain the core continuity. Now, bringing a brand like Betty's to Illinois is exciting for us because we're actually bringing it back to Illinois
Right.
from about 4 or 5 years ago. And I was actually out there in June, and we were talking. I was in Chicago at the NECANN Festival, and we were talking to some consumers and also some buyers. And every time we mentioned it, they said, "Is it coming back?" And we said, "Yeah." We weren't quite
Yeah.
ready to announce it, but yeah, probably pretty soon. And people were ecstatic.
Yeah.
So that's a fun one because it's I don't want to say it's easy, but the messaging to the consumers is more around it's back, and we will have momentum from the bud tenders and the teams to push it. A brand like Nature's Heritage, which will come a little bit later into Chicago because obviously you got to grow the flower. that brand's going to take a little bit of time for us to educate the consumers that for the most part have never had exposure to natures. And so we'll have to tell them about what makes the flower so special, what makes the strain so special, what's the heritage of this brand. And, that's kind of, I don't know, hand-to-hand combat, so to speak. And that's where our brand ambassadors come in. We will do a full sort of funnel of marketing and media and get the name out there. But at the end of the day, and I go back to craft beer in this regard, because it's so similar. People, when you're consuming something, right, when you're putting something in your body, you want to talk to somebody and have an educational experience. And that's what we learned in the beer. That's how every craft beer business brewery started, by the founder walking into a bar and he or she educating them on what the hops and the malts and the flavors you'd expect. And that's the same thing we do every single day with our sales team and our brand ambassadors and every account up and down the street. And so, I mean, that's blocking and tackling, and it's going to take time, but there's not a real different way around it. If especially when you have something as beautiful as a brand like Nature's Heritage that deserves time to understand and learn about it.
What I find is like the branding challenges within this industry, as you guys have kind of alluded to before, where you have one product in one state, but have to come up with a different name in another state. That blows my mind away, because it's like you go into a commercial, watch a football game, and whether you're in Arizona or the northeast part of Boston, you're drinking Bud Light.
Yeah.
If somebody likes Bud Light.
Right.
But what I find, it's crazy to think that if you've got a product in Massachusetts and you want to go into a state of Illinois, it can be completely different based on what you're seeing and reading. Is that like, I guess from what you learned in alcohol, that's got to be completely opposite when you differentiate the two industries, or is it a lot of the same that I'm not aware of?
There's one example in alcohol I can recall of it being like this, and it was the state of Texas, of all states, saying that a stout, you couldn't say stout because that implied the alcohol was higher, even though it was lower.
Okay.
And so we had to take stout off of our cream stout from Sam Adams. That's the only example I can think of where it was like this, with one other exception where the ABV levels were too high to even get into a state, which was a nice problem to have when you're trying to talk about how high the alcohol is. In this industry, in cannabis, where it's state regulated and not federally, it's brutal. It's because it's costly also in terms of time and resource. You have to create the packaging. If you're in 3 states, 3 times, 5 states, 5 times, because there's nuanced differences, if not major differences, on the packaging. And then you got to keep that organized in terms of how does it show up on dispensary websites and make sure the right state's on the right website. So it's a lot more hurdles. That it is what it is. We're all earning our stripes to have the right to make cannabis what it should be in the US, which is federally legal, across state lines, and something that people understand or sort of demystify the stigma about, and understand what the product is in terms of how it helps people. And, you were asking me about the transition from alcohol to cannabis, and I see it not as a replacement, but as a partial sort of substitution. I don't think people are going to stop having a glass of wine with a nice steak or Italian dinner or something.
No,
they shouldn't, but it's a way during the week or on the weekends to cut back and find remedies for sleep and other issues that you might be having. That it's a beautiful natural plant that delivers just that. I think they can work down the road eventually kind of in harmony, but it will take share from alcohol over time. We'll get there.
Yeah, like I have friends who have kids that are graduating university, and they're like, Chad, it's not like when we were growing up. They don't drink anymore. And that's the demographic where
being hungover sucks. Like it does.
It's not as fun anymore as it used to be.
It sucks. Like I went out Saturday night, I was hurting on Sunday. Like it's not a good feeling.
No,
at all. And the younger generations, they've already realized that. I mean, they're all for low dose cannabis, functional mushrooms, into a very, it's a substitute. It's a substitute. It's definitely not going to take the category away. I mean, couldn't be more correct, but I mean, it's definitely a substitute. And I mean, one thing that we've looked at and that we've seen overlooked time and time again is the bud tender. In your marketing mix, I mean, how much emphasis do you put on bud tender education at that point of sale level? to influence the sales of your brands in the markets that you're in?
So the best way I can answer that is every bit that we humanly can.
Yeah.
In terms of percentage of our marketing spend, disproportionate probably versus most competitors, but certainly versus what I'm used to, goes against our sort of feet on the street field marketing team, which we have just an amazing team that is growing. We're adding people to it every day, both in the states we're in, and then as we get ready for Illinois and future states, we try to over-index against feet on the street so that people are in there educating. And it's not just walking in and, hey, we're from Nature's Heritage or Betty's and here's a bunch of stuff. That's fine because we want them wearing our brands and proud of our brands. But it's more about here's what makes nature special. Or when you have somebody that comes in and is, I have friends that I bumped into a month ago and then I saw him last weekend. And both times can't sleep, goes 3, 4, 5 nights without sleeping. I ran to my house. I got a Betty's, the raspberry cream for sleep and brought it back to him. And he texted me the next morning. It was the first night he'd had sleep. And it's like, that's what this product does.
Yeah.
And our team out there every day of brand ambassadors is educating the bud tenders on how to hear what the consumer is saying to you, and then here's a product that can work for you. And then they're confident and feel good. And that consumer comes back the same way my friend came back. They're rewarded and fueled and energized. And like, again, that's brand building at the block and tackling level that I learned 25 years ago.
It's more of a lifestyle versus, say, alcohol, which is a social setting that you're celebrating at an event or something along those lines. But I don't know, maybe some people take a couple glasses of wine before they go to drink, I go to sleep. Maybe that helps. But to Anthony's point, you're feeling it obviously the next morning. Where if this, like I said, it's more of a lifestyle, that it's more than just consuming a cannabis beverage at a football game. It's like, to your point, people needing sleep, right?
Cannabis, if used right, improves your quality of life. Like there's just no question about it. It really, truly helps people in so many ways, from sleep to anxiety to pain to all these different areas. And then at the same time, the beauty of it is it can be completely recreational and safe and fun if, used like it should be, which is how we all as an industry are marketing our products. Again, it's sort of that substitute to just the number one need state of consumers is still relax, which is the exact same number one need state as alcohol.
Yeah.
So in that regard, it is a great substitute. And I kind of use this, how did I used to say it? It's just, it's all of the wow and none of the ow, right? Like you have all the fun that night and you don't wake up in the morning, you wake up refreshed as opposed to waking up like, ugh. And so from that regard, you're right.
Well, I always once you realize that you don't really go back for the most part.
I always like to flip the switch. My mom comes up to me and says, oh my God, they're actually going to legalize cannabis. And she grew up the Nancy Reagan Just Say No era. And it's a lot of boomers and how they were basically brought and raised in their perception of the industry. But can you imagine if cannabis was legalized back in the 1930s and here we are 2023 and what people would be saying about alcohol? Be a totally different story. Like, when you think about, okay, are people going to become stoners and stuff like that? It's complete uneducation, but I really understand the industry. And I'm like, how much alcohol has been addiction, probably destroyed a lot of families. If you think about, yes, there are some positives. People enjoy having a drink, but yes, 100%. Alcohol has definitely caused a lot of issues in society for 80, 90 plus years.
It's so funny. Our dispensary that we just opened a few months ago in Tiffin, Ohio, is like adjacent to the property that the first doctor in Ohio, whose name, of course, I'm going to blank on, prescribed cannabis pre-prohibition, right? So they knew back then that this was something that could help people feel better. And then for whatever reason, we got inverted and alcohol out of prohibition became fine. And cannabis became like this horrible thing, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
Well, and it's fascinating to just quickly shout on the point about your mom, because my mom too, like she's fascinated by this. She just started trying the 8 Go Eddies and feels great sleeping at night and relaxed. And the difference again from alcohol is alcohol, you know where your new drinkers are coming from. They're all starting at
Yeah.
21. No one starts
Yeah.
drinking alcohol at 50. Not no one, but pretty much no one.
Oh, that's interesting.
But
Like,
cannabis, they're coming from everywhere, right? They're
Yeah.
coming from that 21 becoming legal to purchase it in our dispensaries up into their 70s and 80s trying it for the first time.
yeah.
So as you're thinking about your target audience of customer acquisition, it's a pretty wide aperture you have to go after, which is exciting and also a little daunting at the same
So
time.
how do you accommodate that breadth and depth of the age range in your marketing
You
at the product level?
Yeah, you stay true to what the benefits are, because the beauty of the benefits of our products, of cannabis in general, and how we construct our products at MariMed is they're meant for you from the inside. It's not about who you are, how much money you have, or any
Yeah.
other thing. It's all about how you feel, how healthy you are, having great spirit about you. And so that applies to everyone. So if you keep the messaging on the products about how good it is for you as a human,
Yeah.
regardless of your age or anything else, it resonates with everyone. And that's a little bit of a dynamic shift in some ways versus a lot of other CPG categories. Man, it's like, what other category can you say that? Our consumers are coming
Yeah.
from all different ages.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I actually haven't thought about that until you said it. I mean, I mean, it's a good phenomenon for us to have because we're casting a wide net in terms of actual
Yeah.
consumers in the space. I mean, one thing that I've always been fascinated about, and I'm seeing more traction with it with companies, is leveraging e-commerce. I saw that Dama actually bought an AI company this morning that is an AI suggestion engine for their e-commerce sites. How much does e-commerce play in your marketing mix, and how much do you actually need to, I guess, take that into account from like a brand mix with how it's going to resonate and perform online, even though there's such a heavy emphasis on brick and mortar in the cannabis space?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's probably something around 4 months in, I kind of just a light bulb went off. So it took me 4 months to figure it out, which is probably a little too long. But one day I kind of woke up and I was like, oh my God, we're in an e-commerce business.
Yeah.
Because depending on the dispensary, the market, somewhere between 40, usually closer to 50, 60% of the dispensary sales are placed online, or at
Mm,
least the majority of the decision making was done online before entering the store. But
right.
particularly for first and second time visitors, they'd rather just get it online and then you kind of sneak in and buy it because it's your first time
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
dispensary and it's a little, different of an experience. So I would say we are catching up to the e-commerce game very quickly. We actually added a head of e-commerce to our team, joined my team in the beginning of July.
Okay.
And she's just been amazing in terms of helping us think about everything from just menu to how we show up to
Yeah.
how descriptions are to how we come in search, to then how we spend our media dollars and put a much larger portion of it towards e-commerce to bring consumers in. And to the extent we're able to, given the restrictions in so many channels that we're against.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a heavy e-commerce business that we're in, and I don't see that necessarily changing.
And I'm assuming though that I'm assuming that the reliance on e-commerce though, does that make it easier to, I guess, retain customers from like a customer loyalties perspective and building out that infrastructure versus having to capture them at brick and mortar and then get their information? Like when they're coming to your e-com site, they're giving you their information in the
Yeah.
front end in order to execute that purchase.
Yeah, it definitely helps. And you for sure, especially on the retention side, right? Because once
Yeah.
people come in and become part of your loyalty, particularly more so on our dispensary side of the business, as opposed to our wholesale brand side of it,
Mhm.
it definitely makes it something that we can constantly be messaging and communicating and sharing new strains, new whatever it might be that we're offering, price deals, etc. On the brand side, very few brands get a lot of, loyalty programs that are super successful in CPG.
Yeah.
Airlines get it, but it's because it's such a different
You get
experience.
free, you get free, you get free things down the road that are nice
Yeah.
in the airline space.
On the brand side, I tried it with different brands in the past. We're certainly looking at it on this side too. But On the brand side, it's a little bit more traditional, I find, in terms of, you got to drive awareness. You got to let people know how your products are going to benefit them. And then you got to show up at every point with, banner ads and things as they're getting closer into the purchase side of the cycle. And then in store with merchandising. And if we are lucky enough to meet you when you come in and our brand ambassadors are there doing a pop-up, it's still the most powerful educational opportunity we have to convert somebody to one of our brands of anything.
Which makes sense.
So it's an opportunity, but it's definitely on the dispensary side, it's critical.
Well, when I hear Anthony talk about some of like the AI e-commerce approach, you can definitely see the consumer habits and consumer trends with millennials and how they want to consume this. But going back to your point about bud tenders, they're going to have to be people that understand and know how to read people really well, because you're seeing this audience from all factors of life that are coming in that probably have a plethora of questions when they first come in. And obviously, first time that you make any kind of impression is going to be huge to get a consumer or a customer to come back and continue to shop over and over.
Yeah. And we, both at our dispensaries and then with our bud tenders, as we're out working with, with our brand ambassadors, as we're out working with bud tenders. To me, that's the biggest thing is when somebody comes in, especially when they're coming in for the first time, it's all about just help them be eased into this situation, right? There's anxiety walking into a dispensary for the first time. And probably the first few times for most people. And you have to just listen to them. Why are you, what is it you're looking for? What are you trying to solve? What are you trying to help? Are you just trying to have a good time? What's your comfort level? All these different things. And you go back to some of the beverage conversation we had at the beginning. You might find people I need something discreet. I want something that's.
What's the craziest question you ever got? Anything come to mind?
I haven't had a crazy one yet in this business. I'm sure it'll come, but if I come up with it before the end of this podcast, I'll let you know. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Okay. Illinois, Betty's Eddies, as you said, you had a partnership with GTI, now coming back. You've opened up a 5th dispensary. It was announced a couple of weeks ago. This could be a big market for you guys, but this is a saltwater taffy that's similar to, like, say, something like a Starburst. I actually had one when I was in Boston with the crew. I sat down with Ryan and Tim and didn't realize that they came up with this idea. I think they were playing an acoustic guitar in the basement of Timothy's house. But can you imagine being part of that conversation and idea?
Honestly, probably since I joined this industry, the craziest things that have been said have been when I've been hanging out with Tim and Ryan. So that's probably a fair statement. And that's the beauty of great brands. Betty's was founded in their basement, being made for a special person and a purpose. And I mean, how amazing is it to see the brand that it's turned out to be? It's, number 1 or number 2 in most states that it's in, and people are psyched for it to come back to Illinois. And it's so unique. And that's what art in cannabis is to, there's a lot of different areas you can get into and play because there's this somewhat of a rush to it. Trying to infuse everything. Put cannabis in it, but that kind of is going to jump the shark. Ultimately, great products that meet a need and a purpose are going to win out. And Betty's does that. It's amazing tasting. It's unique. It's really hard for somebody to try to make a copycat version of it. It's not possible, but it's really hard. And that's where the branding comes in of just build a great brand around it, which we just continually do, and protect our little space within that chew space.
Yeah, and if people aren't aware, Timothy Shaw, your chief operating officer, Irish American living in Boston. If you're sensitive, I'd say, pull up your socks because he's pretty hard nosed, but he is a great guy, works his ass off and knows this obviously industry based on, I think he was a heavy, consumer at one point. And just what was he doing prior to this? Do you remember correctly? I forget with the crew, I think Howard and a few of the other guys, what he was, the job he had was just, and I think it was fiber optics. He built the entire infrastructure in the Boston region, but that's not an easy job. But
nothing would surprise me about what he did in the past. I'm sure he's probably done a little bit of everything. He's got his hands in lots of businesses. But the key is, you're right. He knows this industry inside and out. He knows the people. He lives and breathes it. The same with Ryan Crandall, our chief revenue officer, obviously, and John Levine, our founder and CEO. Like, I mean, nobody works harder than the three of them. So that's very motivational for the rest of our team to see founders that go that hard every day. And, it's kind of a unique thing too, just having three founders that built up MariMed together and built the brands together still in the company. For some people, they might look at it as, oh, well, it's really hard to have the founders around because they're involved in everything. It's like, no, having the founders around, that's all the history that you can dig back from and find cool ideas to refresh and bring forward all the time. And man, anytime I don't know the answer, what should I do? You get three people there that you can ask, and they've been through it all a dozen times probably each.
Yeah. Well, Howard Schachter too brings a lot of creative ideas with that 280E THC tax party. That was a phenomenal idea.
That was a good idea. That was a good idea.
I know. If we had just thought to throw the world's largest brownie off the boat, we could have taken two ideas and combined it.
Where's Jimmy Kimmel?
I mean, that, we like to think it helped move the 280E discussion along a little bit and the rescheduling discussion along, because it was just a couple weeks before it was announced that Biden's gonna, have them look at the scheduling differently, which is so exciting.
Very exciting. Well, we got to get out to Boston again. I know Ryan and Tim were saying Ryan lives right next to Gillette Stadium. You basically walk through a forest. On the other side of the forest is the actual stadium. So I'd be curious to see what kind of walk home through that forest back to his house once 4 o'clock ticks around would be like. Maybe a scene of The Walking Dead. But needless to say, it would be a blast. But I appreciate you checking in with us, getting a better idea of just the overall branding concepts and some of the differences between the alcohol and cannabis space, some of the challenges that you face, but more importantly, the amount of fun. And I'll leave this with you. Where do you think we are with this industry 5 years from now from a pure branding aspect?
In terms of size or how much space we have to go? I think we're...
It's a broad question, but I think size, but then just how people view it. Like when you're watching, let's say last night, Game 7 of the ALCS, like, are you going to see commercials and stuff like that pertaining to the industry?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're on YouTube, watching anything like that, you'll start seeing us very soon. We're already got some going on YouTube. And then from the standpoint of cable television or, live TV, I hope so. I think in 5 years from now, that's a very realistic opportunity.
Yeah.
How much easier is your job going to get when you can actually leverage digital to bring people into e-commerce? Between leveraging,
we can relate too.
Just making one pack once for the whole country. I mean, our creative team would just be, jumping for joy just with that.
Yeah.
Does that change a lot with rescheduling, or does it have to be full on federal legalization?
It has to be federal legalization to be able to cross state lines. I mean, maybe states will start talking and working things out, particularly in regions. That would certainly be helpful if they could start interacting with each other and lining up their own laws a little bit. That would help, even though you can't cross state lines. But, to me, the biggest thing 5 years from now, and it might be 3, it might be 7, but somewhere in there is brands are going to be the lead that you talk about. Your consumers will still have their segments they play in, but they're going to be talking about the brands that they love more so than I like pre-rolls or I like vapes. It's going to be I like Nature's or I like Betty's or whatever it is for them. And that's, to me, what's exciting and the momentum that we have to run after as an industry. Brands will matter in a big way.
Is Betty's a national brand one day?
I hope so. That's certainly the plan.
Yeah. It's been awesome. It's fun, obviously, meeting people like yourselves, because at the end of the day, this is a young, vibrant industry, and there's a lot of people that used to work for Fortune 500 companies or had a long, extensive career in a lot of established industries. But when you meet people in cannabis, it's all brand new. But this is the whole idea of educating people, getting rid of that taboo image and realizing it's a lifestyle, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And thank you guys for having me. It's been fun to talk to you and just share some of the thoughts on what we have going on our side, because it's just an exciting industry that is only going to get bigger and more fun as we go forward. And there's a lot of good things happening in the near horizon.
Yeah, that's for sure. Jay O'Malley, he is the Vice President of Marketing and Research Development for MariMed. Thanks for joining. Let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks all. Cheers.
Take care.
What is up, everyone? What'd you think of the video? Leave a comment below. And as usual, if you want to subscribe to our channel, then click on the link here. If you want to see more videos like this, then click on the link here. As usual, click on that bell right below us to get all the notifications, because at the end of the day, TDR sets the narrative, because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.